Good morning, guys. My name is Kyle Owens. I am the founder and owner of Game Master, and I want to make this short video to help advertise one of the services I do, which is custom built gaming computers. Now, I've done laptops and also a lot of tablet work as well, but one thing I specialize in is custom built gaming desktops, and I do it for literally 6 times cheaper than name brand industries like Geek Squad. And I can legally advertise this because it's the truth. And my computers perform just as good and sometimes even better for your gaming experience than what you will get at Geek Squad or Steam. And so I'm going to be comparing my build with their top brands, their top types of gaming computers, and we're also going to be comparing the prices, not just the specs. So let me go ahead. I'm going to put on background screen here, and I'm actually going to show you my current specs. But before I do, I want to show you guys the outside of this. Now, this is a recent build of mine. It's one I did for myself, and I did it for about 150 bucks. And it is one of the world's best gaming computers. Now, if you see right away, if you guys can see that, this is an older line XPS, and you guys can see it's the one with the sleek. Now, I actually got this particular one from a client almost 2 years ago. And here, I'll show you guys. We have internal drives and stuff in this as well because I do use it for physical media sometimes. And it has the card reader on there and ports and all that stuff. But we're going to talk about the internal. This is what we call a sleeper PC. A sleeper PC is something that looks really old or really low end, but on the inside, it's like a Lamborghini. You know how nice a Lamborghini looks on the outside? And just think if you took a Buick, like if you took the frame of a Buick, an 80s Buick, and you put it over a Lamborghini. That's basically what a sleeper PC is, if I can put it into context of vehicles for you. So let me go ahead. We're going to pop open Task Manager here, and I'm going to show you guys what we're working with. So I did use an NVIDIA GeForce 1070 here, so that actually has 8 gigs of dedicated RAM. But we actually have 32? No, let me see here. Yeah, 24. Yeah, so we actually have 24 gigabytes of shared RAM, or shared GPU VRAM here. So this actually has 8 gigs of dedicated RAM on the actual driver. Now, this was probably my most expensive part, and I believe I got away with it. Was either 25 or 50, I can't remember. It was a used part on eBay. And so we have the processor in there that shares that has its own VRAM, that has its own graphics integrated into the processor there. So we're going to go over the processor and the GPU, and also the RAM a little bit. I'll also say that I have, I believe, 3 terabytes of space on here. Now, I like to have separate drives for separate things in my setups. So I don't like to put everything on one drive. You can also get a lot more space that way, and also add different drives for different things. So I will kind of touch down on how I have those drives set up as well. And so if you guys are interested in getting something like this from me, I will talk about that at the end after we go over the specs. So yeah, we have 8 gigs of dedicated VRAM here from the actual GPU, and we have 24 shared between the processor GPU and the actual GeForce graphics card. So that's one thing I want to point out here is the 24 gigabytes of shared VRAM. Now, I want to kind of talk about that a little bit because the thing is, NVIDIA is just now, very recently in the last couple of years, just now coming out with dedicated VRAM for their graphics that's this high. So we're talking about something that's been available for years, but hasn't started coming out as dedicated on a single piece of hardware since recently, in recent history. And so you got to really think about it. Are you going to spend $500 on, because that's how much, if you buy a brand new part right now, if you buy that much VRAM in a modern system, the part alone is going to be about $500. That's the bulk price of what you're actually buying. That costs more than the RAM, that costs more than the hard drive, and any other part in your modernized system that you would get from Steam or Geek Squad, Best Buy. And so you guys really have to think about it. You can get away with 24 gigs of VRAM for $25. And right now I'm charging $75 to build, like put all the parts together, build it, do any custom firmware, any custom drivers, and install any, update everything. So, and I'm actually going to show you right now before we get started here. So first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring you over to my Facebook real quick, guys. So, because I'm posting this to Facebook, so I want to show you guys exactly how you can order yours very quickly. And I'll also recap this at the end of the video as well. So obviously, if you're seeing this video, you are actually able to easily come over to my Facebook page. And then you see this Game Master on the side. If you're on mobile, you can also see it. But you just click on Game Master. You follow the Game Master link, Facebook over here. And hold on, because there's actually two ways. So I'm actually about to shut this Facebook page down. But if you click on, you may have to click on See More Work, or you click on something to expand the tab, especially if you're on mobile, you might have to. So there's two ways you can do this. You can click on the Game Master International Facebook page, or you can click on the YouTube link that I also have pinned on the side of my Facebook. You click there. So if you're going to the Facebook page, which we are about to shut down because I created an Android app that's going to be replacing this Facebook page. Plus, I'm locked out of the Facebook page right now. So, and then you can actually click on the eBay link right there. It'll bring you right on over. Oh, yeah, I forgot I shut my store down. So I'll have to update that. It might be like that up here as well. So yeah, I shut my store down. Okay, we're going to have to fix those links. I didn't know that. So what I will do is I will put the link in the description of this video being posted, and that way you guys can directly just click on that link. So after I upload this, we'll have it uploaded. But I want to show you guys, yeah, so you can actually buy the custom built service straight from my eBay here. And then let me go listings. And right now I have a 99.2. Now in the past, we've actually, I got top tier seller status. And so once you earn a status, top tier seller status is really hard to get on eBay. But I actually got that and I held it for several months. So, but I'm actually the second to highest tier right now, I believe. And I believe you actually have to have a store still. So here. And I'm going to actually put this direct link in there so it'll just come directly to you. Oh, yeah. Yeah, currently it's $180. But I'll tell you what. If you happen to see this video and you click on it and you actually purchase my service, I will cut it down 50% for your first custom gaming build. I'm also Phi Theta Kappa, so I'm one of the top most intelligent people in the country. And it says it right here, and that's true. So my GPA actually puts me at the top 10 most intelligent college students within the IT curriculum in this country. And so I've been working with computers since 2007. I didn't start going for an official curriculum until 2022. So you have those right there, the evidence. And yeah, so this link will be there. Now, this is just for the service, but I'll tell you what. So 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, it'll be $90 for you. If you click on this link and actually pay for it, I will rebate you 50% from your purchase of this. And this was just for the service. This is for me building it, doing any custom firmware, custom modifications, and actually making it readily available. Now, after you make the purchase, and I rebate you $90, so it'll be $90 charge for the purchase, plus of course the shipping, so it's $15.75 for the shipping. What I will do is I will talk to you by any medium you want, whether it's phone, email, or through eBay, preferably eBay, because that's the eBay policy. And so we will get together and I will discuss parts with you, your processor, your GPU, your RAM, and what you want your shell of your custom gaming computer to look like. And once we get all that set, I will create another eBay link custom with the actual part cost. Now, I'm going to tell you very clearly that I source used and older parts, but I make sure that your system is modernly compatible. I also give a 1-year warranty for my custom builds at no extra charge. So your system is under warranty, legal contract included with that, for 1 whole year. That makes sure that if anything goes wrong, when you have your custom built system from me, that you will have complete repairs or replacement within that 1-year period after purchase. So yeah, once we get to talking, I will create a separate link. Now the actual parts altogether, my build here cost me $150 in parts. So I'm going to tell you straight up that your build is going to cost part-wise between $150 and $250. So $200, $300, $400. So an average of $200. So you're going to get away with one of the world's best gaming computers for about $300, maybe a little bit less, guaranteed from me, Game Master. So I want you guys to understand that, and we also have a full description here of everything in the details, so if you click and read through that. Also, if you are on mobile, please switch to the desktop version. I have it highlighted right here so you understand that. The mobile app truncates, in other words, cuts off long descriptions like this, but you have to read eBay descriptions. It tells you about the refund and cancellation policy. It tells you about the specifications of the build, and also some of my credentials and experience and stuff like that. So make sure you read that after you click on the link. Now let's go ahead and get back to the specs here that I was talking about, so that you understand why and how this is one of the world's best gaming computers. So the first thing I want to talk about is, let's go ahead. I'm actually going to go to Steam, the Steam app. We're going to talk about Steam first. So I'm going to go down here to Drive Z Video Games. I'm going to go to my Steam, and I'm going to pull up the Steam app on my desktop. And I'm going to show you the price of the new line of Steam machines and what the specs are. But first, hold on. First, let me finish telling you about the specs here real quick. I'll just name them off for you. So yeah, we have 24 gigs of VRAM on this GPU. And up here, we have 32 gigs of RAM, which is that's about 3 times more than what you need for some of the most intensive gaming, right? And the CPU is actually an older CPU, but I want to talk about the specs of it here. And I can get away with actually getting the same processor for you if it'll fit in the system board. But we can get the same specs of CPU for about $10 on eBay used. Yeah, so I can get these specs for you for about $10 on the processor. And of course, the processor has integrated VRAM that is shared with the GPU. So you can get away with 24 gigs or higher of VRAM for a total of $75 or less. And that's the bulk of the cost of the actual parts to actually make it gaming intensive. So you can see the processor supports virtualization here, where it says virtualization enabled. We also have hyper-threading. So hyper-threading is a thing that basically it's overdrive, but it's not overdrive, because I can still technically kick in overdrive on this processor. I can hack it if I want to. That's not recommended for anything. Any professional will tell you straight up don't do that. But it's possible you can do that. But hyperthreading is a process that just allows faster processing. So we have 4 cores. It's a 4-core processor, but it actually has 8 threads. So now there's not a whole lot of difference between threads and cores. Cores are physical cores, like the actual hardware. Threads are something that a lot of processors nowadays, they will have 2 threads per core. So that basically means back in the day, before threads were a thing, we had cores. So we had a single core, we had dual core. Back in the day, dual core was the new hip and hype, right? Then we came out with quad cores. So, 10, 15 years ago, you would actually have better performance on many games if you had dual core with higher GHC as compared to quad core with lower GHC. So GHC is really what you want to think about, but you also want at least 2 cores. We also have single core double threads, which were also a big hit then. But so I want to talk about this. We have 8 threads, 4 cores, and the base speed of this processor is 3.4 gigahertz. Now, my processor actually gets up to 4.1, so it's a range. And most processors are a range. So my base is 3.4, and it gets up to 4.1. And that 4.1 is damn good. That's like a high-end processor right here. So you're going to have a lot of trouble finding a processor better than this. You're going to wind up spending a good $400 or $500 on a brand new processor that just came out. That it might be dual core with 4 threads, so you'll have half as many core/threads, but you'll have maybe just as much GHC, and you're going to spend $400 or $500 on it, right? So you got to think about this. This is one of the best processors on the market, and it came out years ago, right? So this is kind of how I do my custom builds. And people who work in first-party IT companies, like Dell, like I actually met a guy that worked for he worked for AMD. He was an AMD factory line person who actually put together these, and so he probably, I believe he had a degree. He would have to understand a good amount of this stuff. And he actually called me a liar publicly and embarrassed me in front of on the internet. Called me a liar and saying, there's no way you can get these specs for that low a price. And I said, yes, you can. Yes, you can. You can actually source these older parts. If you actually know what you're doing, you can source these older parts, and you can actually get a better gaming experience than spending anywhere from $1,500 to $3,000 at Geek Squad. And so we're actually going to compare this with Geek Squad and, of course, Steam. So I'm going to pull that up, but I want to show you guys the processor here. So yeah, these 4 physical cores, 8 threads, hyper-threading, plus gets up to 4.1 gigahertz. Okay, and for the memory, we have 32 gigs. I went over that. We have 24 gigs of VRAM for the actual graphics on this. And then my drives, I kind of want to talk about my drives a little bit. So I actually have 2 hard drives and 1 SSD. Now my SSD is wired. So there's a way here in the actual physical build you can wire. So you'll usually have SATA 0, SATA 1, SATA 2, and SATA 3, and sometimes SATA 4, depending on your system board. And so the order of the SATAs will determine what is priority, and you can also change those settings in BIOS or UEFI as well. But for the most part, your operating system, which is actually on my hard drive, not my SSD, runs into SATA 0. And then we have the actual disk drive that I have as, I believe that's SATA 1. And then for SATA 2, I have my SSD. And so the SSD is where I store all my actual virtual video games. So all my Steam games and anything that's downloaded to my system, like any ROMs and emulators, go to there as well, because that SSD works faster than a hard drive. And so I kind of want to talk about this. I believe I spent maybe $75, and I have 3 terabytes of data. Now, if you go out and you buy 3 terabytes of hard drive space, you're going to wind up spending $300. I shit you not. You're going to spend around $250 genuinely if you go out and buy a 3 terabyte drive, okay? And and here's one thing too. Hard HDDs cost less than SSDs. So the way I do it, I was able to spend about $75, maybe a little less, maybe 50 on 3 whole terabytes, and I actually dedicate the SSD strictly for fast stuff I need, like the video games. My third, which is a hard drive, is for general storage. And so that's kind of how I do my builds. Now, if you ask me to do your build a little differently, of course I will. I'm not going to fuss with you. I will give you my recommendations, but I'm not going to tell you absolutely no. But I do advise that you listen to my recommendations for my custom builds for you, because I can give you a better build than Geek Squad, a better build than Steam, and I can do it for literally knocking a whole zero off. So one thing I want to mention before we get into comparing to Steam and Geek Squad Best Buy is, if you go out and you buy a gaming computer from Steam or Geek Squad that has the same specs, gaming specs as this, you're going to spend anywhere from $1,500 to $3,000 when you can get yours for about $150 plus my $90 build fee. So you got to think about that, guys. You really have to think about that. You're putting on an extra zero to buy a brand new system that's actually going to perform the same or less than my systems that I will build for you. And so that's why I'm making this video. I want people to understand that I can build you a system that's the same or better. And I can also probably make the outside look better for you too at very little cost. It doesn't have to be a sleeper PC. I mean, you can get a sleek design. You can get a sleek design computer like this. That's an older line, or I can get you a modern shell if you'd like. You know, so there's a whole lot of things that I can do for you that you just can't get at Steam and Geek Squad. And so let me go ahead. Let me close this out a little bit now that you know the specs we're working with. Actually, I'm going to minimize it because I'm probably going to pull that back up for you and show you guys. So first thing I want to do is I want to go to Steam Machine. Now, if you guys don't know, Steam actually came out with, they were selling it. So hardware, Steam Deck, Steam Machine, here we go. They got them right there. So if you guys don't know, Steam Machines actually came out back in 2007-8. That was their first line, and they actually contracted with several different name brand first-party companies. And then they kind of died out. It was unsuccessful. And now they have a new line of Steam Machines. They look like a little box here. You can see it on screen. And look at this. Their lowest cost Steam Machine is over $1,000. Over $1,000 for their lowest priced, lowest tier, low end Steam Machine. And I'm going to compare the specs here. Look, 512 gigabytes. So when they say that, they're talking about storage. Now, you know, back in the 2000s, we're talking about mid to late 2000s, in early 2010s, 512 gigabytes was a huge deal. That was a lot of space. Nowadays, we need that in terabytes because we're no longer in the physical, you know, age. We're now in the digital age where most video games are digital. We're, you know, a lot of stuff that we don't go to the video stores anymore. Everything's stored on our computers now. Well, you got to think about this. 512 gigabytes. Do you want to get 512 gigabytes or do you want to get 3 terabytes like what I have on mine, right? You got to think about stuff like this, right, guys? All right, and then the CPU, it says semi-custom AMD Zen for 6CT to 12CT. So, guys, this processor alone is actually half of what my processor is in my custom build. It's actually not half. It's actually It's less, but it's not that less. So if you were to actually compare this, I'm gonna do this easily. It's okay. It's gonna let me copy it. So let me go here, and I'm gonna pull it up for you. I'm gonna actually have AI tell you, so you're hearing it from a trusted source, right? So you don't think I'm on bullshit. So here, I'm gonna do this. Explain what this means in processor IT to a normal person that doesn't know IT language. So we'll put it into, because there's a language that I don't speak, and that's non-IT. So a lot of IT stuff. Um, So it's talked about 6 CPU cores. Now, I will say that a modern processor that has 6 CPU cores is actually pretty damn decent. My last computer before this was actually, I had the world's best gaming laptop. The very first line of hexa-core processors was in there, and that was a six core. So it is pretty good. 6 core with 12 threads. So you are actually getting 12 threads. So this CPU, the actual thread and core count, is actually higher, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I talked about this, you know. So let's see what the actual GHZ is on that, because that's what matters more than cores and threads. I'm not saying cores and threads are pointless, because they absolutely do matter. But when we're talking about gaming, the GHZ matters more than the cores and the threads. So, tell me, what G, did I get the GHZ that is? Let's see what it'll tell me here. Yeah, it's the lowest cost Steam machine. Not the old line, but the new line. And then we will kind of copy and paste this from here. Oh, I pulled that up. I didn't mean to. Let's see what it tells us here. It says, now that I know you mean the new 2026 Valve Steam machine, yeah. 6 core 12 thread runs at 4.86 GHz. Okay, so that's actually pretty good. That's technically more than the processor I have in mind. So that is damn good. The processor, yes, definitely trumps my processor, but not by a whole lot. That's probably overkill, and that does matter a whole lot for games, yes. But I will also say one more thing, that the actual VRAM that's on your dedicated graphics card actually matters more than your CPU. I know, Kyle, you're crazy, right? What are you talking about? So if you've ever played a game on a low-end computer and you don't know really a whole lot about the hardware and the tech specs, you're sitting there thinking, oh, well, maybe I need more RAM. And so you new age gamers, you're sitting there, you're trying to max out your system, 64 gigs of RAM, 128 gigs of RAM, and then you go and brag about it, and people think you're stupid because you thought that RAM was your issue. But no, RAM matters very little nowadays. A lot of what matters is your VRAM on your graphics, or your shared VRAM, and also the specs of your processor. And so I will talk a little bit about that as well, not a whole lot, because I don't want to insult anyone's intelligence. But what I'm saying here is that VRAM on your graphics card matters a whole lot more than your processor specs nowadays. Now, there are some things, so if you're running older emulators where you can't do the cycler trade-off. So a lot of emulators now, if you enable advanced settings, you can actually trade off processor for VRAM in your GPU. So you can actually change that. So when you're virtualizing stuff, you can actually swap whether it's using your processor or your VRAM in your GPU, which is a really nice feature for a lot of stuff. But I will say that, you know, the cost of my system is about 1/3 of what this is. So that's one thing you need to understand. And also, so 8 gigs, so 8, 16, 17, 8, 9. So they actually have 1/3 of the RAM. So the VRAM here, we're talking about the VRAM. That's your actual VRAM for your graphics. So they actually have 1/3 of the graphics RAM, the VRAM, than what my build has. The cost is also 3 times more expensive, and so it has 16 gigabytes of DDR5 dedicated RAM. So if we were to take the newer, if we were to compare the newer kind of DDR5 here to the DDR3, the 64, because this has 64 gigs of DDR, and we're no longer talking about VRAM. So we already determined that this has 1/3 the VRAM my build has. So if we were to take the actual RAM, just normal RAM, 16 gigabytes, it's going to be about 25% less, because DDR5 and DDR6 is better than DDR3. That's true. It has a faster process speed rate. But one thing a lot of people fail to understand is that the basic concept of RAM is supposed to be what that speed was. So back in the day, before we had different speeds of RAM, RAM was actually the speed of your system. So a lot of people fail to understand that nowadays. So that's still technically the case. RAM is how quickly access and recall happens with a system. So that's basically the speed of your system. So here's two ways to speed up your actual system for accessing files and games and loading and stuff too. Now I will say that your loading does, so VRAM actually has a lot when you're using graphics intensive app, and so is processor, but RAM absolutely matters still today, but it's just not the most important factor like it used to be 15-20 years ago. So if you think about it, if you have more RAM, and here's one thing you need to keep in mind, especially if you're a technical person like I am, having more RAM is actually better than having less RAM with higher speed on those RAM chips. That's one thing you need to understand. So if you get, say if we have 16 gigabytes of RAM in this instead of 32, yet the speed is twice as much. The speed on the actual RAM chip is twice as much. That system would actually perform less well than having twice the amount of RAM at half the speed of that RAM. Because we're talking about the amount of speed we have, the amount of physical hardware we have as compared to the infrastructure of that hardware. And so you need to understand this. So when we're talking about here, Steam Machine 16 gigabytes of DDR5, this system actually performs 25% less well than my build here when we're talking about the actual RAM, strictly RAM comparison. Now, this has 512 gigabytes of NVMe SSD. Now, I will say that NVMe SSD is technically faster than a normal SSD, but it doesn't perform any better than and this is the funny thing. So if you compare an NVMe SSD with so if you install your video games on an NVMe SSD instead of a normal SSD, and you have to understand that the actual connection into the bus of the system, the speeds are actually the same. I shit you not. So if you're running it from like SATA, an SSD into SATA into your bus into your system there, It's actually the speed actually caps by the connection that's wired into the bus of your system, especially if you're on laptop. So if you actually mod your laptop and you think, oh, I'm going to get an NVMe to have faster video game load times or faster video game play or whatever, I'm going to tell you that the speed of your drive is actually capped by the connection of your system into the bus of your build. So, and even if it wasn't, the using an SSD for your digital video games is actually overkill. It is faster. You can tell a noticeable difference between load times and whatnot, actual gameplay running from an SSD as compared to an HDD, but you cannot tell a difference between an NVMe running a video game from an NVMe as compared to a normal SSD. Like, an NVMe is so overkill that the human eye and brain cannot recognize the difference, even if the actual speed wasn't capped by the connection into the bus. So that's something you need to understand. These are just terms. These are technical terms and new form factors to market and sell at a higher value. They're trying to scam you as the buyer. And you as the buyer don't understand these technical terms and the technical limitations of it. And you think, oh, because it's a new name, it sounds cool. It sounds like it's a higher quality, higher performing computer, but it's actually not. So this Steam machine, if we were to combine all the specs of the gaming aspects of the Steam machine, you're actually getting about half the gaming quality as this. And you're paying over $1,000 when mine it's only going to cost you about $300, and it's going to perform twice as better as the lowest cost Steam machine. Okay, and now if you go to Best Buy or Geek Squad, you're going to wind up spending an absolute minimum of $1,500 in order to get the same specs. I shit you not. So you're going to spend about $1,500 to get the same specs as the Steam machine. It's going to be performing half as good as my custom builds for you. Now, in order to get the same gaming specs as my custom build from Geek Squad, you're actually going to spend about $3,000 as compared to $300. You're putting a whole extra zero on that in order to get the same gaming quality experience. And so I wanted to make this video. I wanted to tell you guys that I'm selling you a $3,000 value computer at $300, custom built for you. That's going to perform the same or better than what you're going to get from Steam Valve or Geek Squad Best Buy. And guys, so again, check out this link on here. I'm going to put together the same specs, and I'm going to pull this back up for you before we close this. So you see again the overall gaming experience between the GPU, the CPU, and the RAM is more than double what you're going to get at Geek Squad or Steam, but it's going to be anywhere from 10 times cheaper to half cheaper. It's going to perform the same or better than what they are selling. Guys, please be smart, buy smart, come to me for your custom builds. Check out that GPU, 24 gigs of GPU. I talked about it. I'll say it again. I'll say it again. NVIDIA is just now coming out with 24 gigs of dedicated VRAM for your processors. Guess how much they cost? You don't even want to know how much they cost. It's gonna break you. It's gonna break your wallet. Yeah. So you really can't get much better than the GPU. The actual gaming quality on this. You're gonna spend, if you want to get the exact same gaming experience from me, from an actual name brand company that's going to perform better than this, you're going to spend a good $4,000 at minimum to get a better gaming experience overall. Like, I shit you not. The CPU, 32 gigs, or I'm sorry, the RAM, 32 gigs. The CPU, again, that's 4 cores, 8 threads. Hyper-threading. Here's another thing about hyper-threading. Hyper-threading basically doubles your processor. So we're talking about 4.1 gigahertz at 8 threads, plus the hyper-threading. The hyper-threading is what matters. So this was a concept about 10, 15 years ago that hyper-threading, and it's called different things. So if you're going with like AMD instead of Intel, it's called something else. But hyper-threading is a process which makes your processor the actual read it, like the actual transfer of data through the threads and cores to double. So hyper-threading, if I can put it into context for you, you're basically if you technicalize it, this processor is technically better than that AMD one because of the hyper-threading. So that's something I didn't. Now the AMD. So I believe that this processor doesn't support hyper-threading, and that's AMD. So it's called something else. But let me ask so you guys can see online. Does this processor support the AMD version of hyper-threading? And then I'm going to say I assume not, because I owned the first line of hexa-core processors and looked into it before and said it did not. Let's see what it says here. Yes, okay, so it says yes, the new Steam Machines Zen 4 does support AMD's for hyper-threading. Simultaneous multi-threading, yeah, so it's called multi-threading. Okay, so it is technically better, but not much. The actual overall build, you're getting much less RAM and much less VRAM for your graphics. So you're actually going to get a much less better gaming experience than what my build would do. And you got to consider the price. And Geek Squad stuff, it's the same thing, same concept. So yeah, but if you were to actually put that into context, you're actually you're doubling it. You're doubling everything. So hyper-threading and multi-threading is basically doubling your processor. So the specs you see here are basically doubled. And that's a really huge thing. Plus virtualization, enabling that virtualization, which not all processors support. That actually means a whole lot of stuff, especially when you have your system set up to where your integrated graphics on your CPU actually works in conjunction with your dedicated graphics card. That VRAM that is shared actually heightens it, especially when you're using an older graphics card like the GeForce 1070. So the dedicated 8 gigs of RAM, and here's the funny thing. So most custom, like most builds, if you have a dedicated graphics card, a newer line one, like if you have VRAM, most of the time that shared RAM is actually going to be slower than your dedicated 8 gigs. And it could actually hurt your gaming experience. But in this case, it's actually in reverse. So my custom builds will always be in reverse. I will always guarantee a top quality gaming experience you won't find anywhere else for the same price. Right? So if you go to Geek Squad or Steam and you buy your gaming systems, you spend over $1,000, you're going to have a worse gaming experience than what I give you at a fraction of the price. And you guys have to understand that. So the way I have it's actually in reverse. So the shared RAM that works in conjunction with the dedicated RAM is actually faster in my custom build. And I'm going to tell you why, because this is an older line GPU. So that 8 gig of dedicated RAM on the graphics card is actually slightly slower than the shared VRAM. So the shared VRAM actually comes from the processor here, and with that enabled virtualization plus the hyper-threading capabilities, which actually works in conjunction with that VRAM, actually makes the shared RAM faster than the 8 gigs of dedicated RAM on that GeForce 1080. So you guys got to keep that in mind here. Yeah, guys, so again, please head on over to my eBay. I'm going to link that here in the video. I look forward to building you one of the world's best gaming computers you can't find anywhere else. Because I promise you, Geek Squad ain't going to give you this. Steam's not going to give you this. And if they do happen to give it to you, they're going to put an extra 0 on that just to meet the same gaming specs. Thank you guys so much. Again, my name is Kyle Owens. I am the creator and owner of Game Master. Thank you.